evening. Good evening. So the second of the 3 presentations that I was asked to do is over sexually transmitted diseases. And so the approach that I took with this is that I'm not assuming anybody in here has an STD or will get an STD, but I was assuming that if we had people from the community or anybody in here, just from a general point of view, so if you see any of the prevention, any measures, anything like that, don't think that I'm promoting it, I'm just, it's education-wise, all right? And so, as I said, the presentation is over sexually transmitted diseases. And so, what we're going to be looking at today, of course, is the topic, sexually transmitted diseases. We're going to look at the common kinds of STDs, and then we're going to look at community resources, like what we can, like for example, if you're dealing with something like that, or you know somebody who has one, the kind of resources that they can use or go to in order to get better. And of course, the conclusion of it all. And so, if you don't know what sexually transmitted diseases are, they are defined as diseases that can be spread through sexual contact. So whether that is anal sex or oral sex, anything like that. A lot of people believe that STDs can only be spread through vaginal sex, but it's not true. It can also be spread through anal and oral sex as well. It can also be spread through skin-to-skin contact with infected sores. So if you, for example, were to come in contact with anybody that has an STD, if they have an open sore or anything like that, and you came in contact with it, you have the chance of contracting their STD as well. Or if you come in contact with their blood or body fluids, or let's say you share needles or syringes, so that's usually for people who are drug addicts and stuff like that, they share needles. And so the STD rate among those, among people like that is very high as well. They can also be called STIs, sexually transmitted infections, and those infections can also then go into diseases. So for example, if you know HIV is, or what's it called, human immunodeficiency virus, it's a virus, but it can lead into a disease, which is AIDS. And so the infections can eventually grow into diseases. And there are more than 20 types of STDs, and so among those are the common types we know are chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, human papilloma virus, which is HPV. So if you're in here, if you're an adolescent, within the past couple of years, you've probably taken an HPV shot. It's a way of boosting your immune system against this kind of virus. So the common kinds of STDs, we're going to look at 3 of them. There's more than 20 types, but we don't have time to go through each of those 20. We're just going to look at 3 of the most common types. So the first one is syphilis, and that is an STD caused by a bacteria that actually infects your genital area, your lips, your mouth area, your anus, and of both the men and the women. And so if you look at that picture over here on the right, the first stage of syphilis starts off as one painless sore. And so people usually get it like right in, somewhere around their mouth area, they get that sore. And that sore lasts about a couple weeks. And then eventually over time it can go away. But then it can present itself again in the form of a rash, whether that's in the palms of your hands or the bottoms of your feet, and it come again. And most people think that once those symptoms and stuff go away, that means the syphilis or anything like that has gone away. It's not true. Just because the symptoms have gone away doesn't mean that the disease itself has gone away. It actually can keep presenting itself over and over again for 1 to 2 years. So if you do not get those symptoms checked by the doctor or don't get it cured by the doctor, you still have syphilis. And so don't believe that just because you have the symptoms and it's gone, it's gone. That's not true. And then it can be cured with antibiotics, like I said. So it is one of the STDs that can be cured. And so if you know anybody that has had syphilis or anything like that, and they're not sure if they can take it to the doctor because it's not curable, that's not true. They can go to the doctor, and as long as they take all of the antibiotics, it can be cured. And then the second type of, most common type of STD is chlamydia. It is a bacteria that is caused by a bacteria that infects women in their cervix, their rectum, or their throat, and then men in their urethra, which is in their penis, and then the rectum and throat as well. And the way that starts, usually people can't really pinpoint when they have chlamydia, because in about 50 to 70 women and 30% of men, the symptoms, they usually don't get any symptoms at all. So a lot of people can go years, months, weeks without really knowing if they have chlamydia. But when those symptoms do come out, if they come out, it comes as either a burning sensation when you're urinating in both men and women, and a sort of discharge from either the penis or the vagina. And so those are the symptoms. If they come, those are the symptoms of chlamydia. And once again, it's one of the STDs that can be cured, which is through antibiotics. So as long as you take all of the antibiotics, you can be cured from chlamydia as well. But another thing I forgot to mention, even though these are all separate STDs, you can have more than one STD at a time. So if you're not careful, you may think, oh, I had syphilis, it's gone. I have syphilis now, so I can't get chlamydia. Some people still keep practicing unsafe sexual practices and stuff like that, and believing that they cannot contract another sexual disease as long as they have one, but it's not true. You can have multiple at a time. And so obviously it'd be a little harder to cure if you have multiple at a time. And then the third most common STD is gonorrhea, and that is also caused by a bacteria that infects the genital tract, your mouth, and your anus. And so if you've noticed, where it infects is usually similar in each of these STDs. So this is how people usually know if they have a sexually transmitted disease. That also, like chlamydia, does not always present symptoms as well. But if you do get symptoms, you can once again also get discharge from your penis, from the penis or vagina, from the rectum. You also get a painful type of urination and then women can get abdominal pain and bleed, and very, very painful bleeding whenever they are on their periods. And so that's how some people might be able to tell that they have gonorrhea. And once again, that can be cured with antibiotics. And so, in terms of prevention, the best way, which in any of the articles that I read, the research that I've read, is to abstain. So as long as if you abstain, I only put penile and vaginal sex, but from any kind of sex in general, oral, anal, any of those, that is the most effective way to prevent the transmission of STDs. If you abstain and you're not having sex with anybody, that's what I mean, then you obviously won't get an STD from anybody. But if you do, once again, if you're sexually active or have been sexually active, the Center for Disease Control recommends that you get screened every year, because you really never know. And that's really, if you some people get STDs, they might just sleep with one person and then they get an STD, but you don't know the people that person has slept with and what they might have. And so that is important. It's also important to limit the number of sexual partners that you have, and also to know the number of their history as well. Because that's why a lot of before you get married, they recommend that, or before you even sleep with anybody in general, which is for us, before you get married, you're supposed to go through a series of tests and all that other stuff in order to figure out if they might have any of these kinds of diseases, because you really never know. Like I said, some of these diseases don't have symptoms, so you could be sitting here fine if that's what has happened, and then you would never know. But it's best to get tested at least once a year. And lastly, you should use contraceptives correctly and consistently. There are some people that don't believe in using condoms, they don't believe in using any sort of protection or anything like that, but it's important. If that is what you're engaging in, it's important to use protection at all times. And don't think, another thing is the rate of using a condom or anything like that doesn't necessarily mean that you won't get an STD. It's actually, it's not proven to prevent against STDs at all. Like, you might have a little chance of not getting an STD, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So like I said, the most important thing to do is to just abstain, of course. And so in terms of the community resources, these are some of the places, the top places that people go to. So like the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, if you go to that website, they have a list of all kinds of contraceptions that are okay for people to use. If you go to Planned Parenthood, they have education on these kinds of stuff, pamphlets as well. They did a presentation on this in one of my classes, and I had a bunch of them, which I was showing them yesterday, and I forgot to bring them. I would have passed them around. And then the Office on Women's Health, the Emergency Contraception website, they have all of these resources out there. And so even though we're raised in the church and we're taught not to practice premarital sex and anything like that, or to engage in premarital sex, if you have done it or anything like that, it is best to get tested. And if that is something that you're currently dealing with, because we all have different things that we deal with, it's best to just practice protection, and just to practice just like the theme of our thing is hope. There's always hope. So don't think that just because you have an STD, there's something wrong with you, or there's no cure. There is, but it's just seeking out help and just practicing the right kind of methods. All right. And those are my references that I used. And that is the end of the presentation. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, HPV, STD.
It's a kind of STD. HPV is a kind of STD.
Okay. So your pedia and the recommend this. I think pedia and one of my women, the man in my home now was and now here and then my woman is more. Oh, okay. Yeah, doctor, and it's for both for men and boys.
Yes, like normal. Oh, okay, Christian.